All right, welcome to the Erasing Shame podcast. I'm your host for today, Sam, and filling in for DJ, coordinating with them for this month as we are having conversations during Pastor Appreciation Month to talk about mental health and erasing shame with different thought leaders and pastors. And today we have Pastor Steve Choi. He's the founding pastor and lead pastor of Crossway Church, where they are currently meeting in Garden Grove. They've just celebrated their 15-year anniversary. Congratulations. That is awesome. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Sam. Man, what a privilege to be here with you and whoever is able to, join us later on. But man, thank you so much for the kind words.
Absolutely. So excited. I've known you for a long time. So amazing to see you last so long in ministry, especially during the pandemic, and have a lot of my friends actually go to your church and your campus. And so I love that how you've grown. And I know I remember podcasting you a long time ago. And so it's great to see you still leading and being healthy. And that's why we wanted to interview you today, just to see how do you last so long in ministry and be so faithful, especially being a lead pastor in a time like this. So the first question I want to just ask you is, how has your church and ministry been coming out of the pandemic?
Oh man, I think it's been a mix of joy and grief. I think a little bit. Those are the two words that comes to mind. Joy and it was awful to just be recording sermons and putting it up on YouTube, during those times. And, we did I remember we had a VBS that was a drive-through thing. And then one was on YouTube, and it was just kind of, discouraging. And then to just start seeing people is a joy. And then at the same time, not seeing everyone is kind of sad. It was kind of a grieving as well. And so with mixed emotions on two extreme sides, we're kind of coming out of that, I think, as everyone else is. And so we're navigating something new. It's forced us to do a quick learn on how to do things online better, and the reality of certain, online ministries and what that's like. And then yet still dealing with, some people who, with whatever they're going through, some are more sensitive than others. Some have formed different habits. And so we're missing some people as well. And so, we're figuring it out as we go, but it's been a mix of both. And it's been kind of the two far extremes, I think I could say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that part of how people have responded, whether in your church or just what you've heard from other pastors and your friends. Like, what are the challenges that you're hearing, and maybe some of these new patterns that people have developed, especially in the Asian American church context?
Well, I think one of the things that came to mind, and I was talking to some different people too, and was this idea of kind of like fatigue. People were, you heard that a lot about Zoom fatigue and things like that. And I think, even at our services that was online, you could kind of see it, you could see on YouTube, like how long someone's been on and when they started to watch, when they turned it off. And it's not that we follow all those things, but when I see it, we see the numbers tapering off and how many views and all of that. It was kind of novel in the beginning. But I think there's also a relational fatigue. A couple of years of being 6 feet apart, awkward handshakes, no hugs. And I feel it personally. I don't know if that other person is comfortable if I give them a normal handshake, or do I have to go with the fist bump, or if they want to meet up, do they want to meet in a restaurant, or do I have to be, and I want to try to be all things to all people, especially in these times. And so there's some of that relational fatigue, which leads to kind of a reluctance to, I think there's, in general, people are a little bit reluctant to, just engage new people, because you're not sure, you're not sure how they feel about COVID or whatnot. And so people, and then it's another thing I've seen is it's been a kind of an excuse for people to see whoever they really want to see, and kind of ignore the people they don't want to, and I've talked to so many people who, like someone didn't want to see their, in-laws, and they're using COVID as an excuse. But, I had one couple I was counseling, and and then the spouse was seeing their parents regularly, but they say, oh, we shouldn't see your parents because of COVID and things like that. And it's kind of funny, but it's sad. And so it's become kind of an excuse as well. So there's some of that. I think one of the other things is just this habit of loneliness that a lot of people have replaced face-to-face with just social media and things like that, right? And it's so, there's a subtle danger to that. First of all, it's not real, and secondly, it's only one way, right? You're just consuming. You become a consumer of society or social relationships, and and then it's obviously it's not real, right? It's people's highlights. It's doctored up. It's edited, and so it's a relationship where I consume and I offer nothing. And we start thinking of ourselves as maybe I have nothing to offer, right? Whereas someone has so much to offer, and that obviously will affect our own self-esteem and our view of ourselves, that are the value of our lives. And so, yeah, I think that I've seen a lot of that. It's not everyone exact, obviously, but some of those thoughts that I've seen. And then, yeah, certain churches, man, just struggling through this. It was a difficult time. Yeah, I haven't recovered fully. I've heard some of that. So those are some thoughts that come to mind.
No, those are great thoughts. I love the fatigue theme, the Zoom fatigue. I totally get that. Relational fatigue, I can relate to that. People have used that as an excuse to isolate or not be around people. And I think it's almost, even today, like someone shook my hand and I was like, oh my goodness, like now I gotta go wash it, or like put hand sanitizer. And I didn't care in the past, but now I'm like, it's just a habit of like, oh, I just want to have clean hands. So do you feel like there's also God fatigue as far as like people not engaging in church more, or they've watch it online supposedly, or they're just checked out? And because I think early on the pandemic, they said people were coming online, engaging with God. But now that we're past it, it's like, the engagement doesn't seem to be coming back as much. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. It just reminds me how quickly we are forgetful creatures, and I remember during the lockdown, man, I've had people, friends of church members contacting me. Is this the end? Is Christ coming back? And I mean, just really seeking God and asking questions. And then within now, a year and a half, 2 years, they've forgotten that, and so it reminds me of, the whole book of Judges, right? They keep forgetting. And the book sounds, when you read Judges, it seems like Groundhog Day. It's the same story over and over and over. And at the end, it says everyone is doing whatever they see right in their own eyes, and they do their own thing. And in a snippet, I feel like maybe we're kind of in that state where they've forgotten, the lessons. I don't know if you remember, that there was that one, Andrea Bocelli did a concert in Rome in front of all these churches, and it was live, and it was a big event, and it was when everyone was locked down, and so it was this emotional thing, and people were like, crying watching that, and then everyone started recording those Zoom praise songs, right? The what was it, the blessing or something like that, and they were singing in different languages. I particularly don't even like that song because it reminds me of those kind of difficult times. It's like the theme song of COVID for me. But yeah, during that time, it was like, man, people were logging in and they found strength and they were seeking God, and then we forget, and then we're off to our pleasures, and it's in a way not surprising, right? As we think about who we are as people. So
Oh
And
yeah,
so the ministry continues, right?
absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think you hit on the other thing that you said earlier about isolation or loneliness, and that is a very big pandemic, not just in America, around the world, where social media has become an outlet to have friends or connections, and an excuse not to connect. And so there's a lot of challenges that we're facing. How have you personally um, overcome that, or how do you create health in your life so that you aren't isolating or lonely or disconnected even with God and with other people? And how have you managed to create health in
Yeah,
that time?
man, I think it's um, just to remind ourselves the value of people, value of getting together,
Mm-hmm.
value of going to a service, value of having a meal with someone. Um, just the difficulty and how eating alone, you just lose all enjoyment in the process, right? You can be at the best restaurant, and if you're eating alone, it's not enjoyable. And so the idea of we're made that way. Um, there was that one study done by Harvard, Waldinger, I think was the name, and it was like it's a study that lasted like 90 years or something.
Yeah.
And they asked these people what was their kind of the key to longevity in life and health, and it all came down to good relationships. It was good for the body, it was good for the brain. That was kind of their summary. I paraphrase that, but you know. And so, yeah, it's the idea of the biblical idea of fellowship, not something about being there in the flesh, being there face to face. You think about Ecclesiastes 4, two are better than one. How can one help the other up when they fall? And I think about the picture like, you watch an NBA game, and when a guy falls on the ground, their teammates run up quickly. They grab their hands, they pull them back up. And then once in a while, you'll see someone fall and no one pick them up. And yeah, these guys are super athletic. They can get up. That's not a problem, but it communicates so much more. It's kind of a sad picture that, oh my gosh, like, is there a problem there? Do they not care for each other? And it sends a message beyond. It's not so much he needs help getting up off of, the ground. It's this, we're together, you get up faster. So I think about some of those things, and I know it is, and I was sharing this with our church family too. I said, it is far better to eat a donut for your body at church together than to eat kale alone, and I say that, and eating a salad by yourself versus being with people, having a donut on Sunday is far better. And I half jokingly, but with half seriousness, encourage them to come out and fellowship. And there's something about that. I think that's so powerful. And so that's kind of kept us going, and that's given me strength personally. And yeah, for sure.
No, I that reminds me of a conversation I had with someone who said, he still goes to church, but he goes to church online. And it started from COVID, and he still watches online because it's comfortable, it's easier. And I get that. I mean, I totally understand that, that habit that has formed because of that. And then at the same time, it's also because it's easier and comfortable not to have to meet people or have to connect. And, it's easier to isolate and just be comfortable. But there is something beautiful about gathering together and doing life together in community, which I love that principle of eating a donut together. It's far healthier than eating a salad alone, which I totally agree. I mean, spiritually wise, at least, right? I think there's something beautiful that happens when a church comes together. And even like I went to Disneyland one time by myself before the pandemic, and it was like super sad. I was like by myself riding the ride, and it's just not the same. So I totally get and understand that. I hope people would understand that themselves. But I think sometimes they value the comfort over the moment of connection. Have you seen that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and not just in church life, but really with work life, right? And everyone, a lot of people I talk to, they're still working from home. I work from home a lot more now, and but what everyone keeps sharing is, man, they miss just the going out to lunch together, the casual stuff, right? Where things get, and they talk about how work gets done faster, right? When you could talk over a cup of coffee in the break room real quick to make a decision, instead of setting up a meeting that's at 1:00 and you got to set it up, and then and then you're tired, so you don't even want to do the meeting. And so definite value of that.
It's good.
And but and I'm not against online stuff, or I'm not like, old school, or I don't think it's a theologically bad thing or anything like that. I just think that being in person outweighs something that we watch and become a spectator of. So that's just my thoughts. Yeah,
I agree. So it's not easy being a pastor, especially during the pandemic. A lot of people have resigned, quit. Thankfully, you have not. You're still standing and you're still here. But we have challenges as pastors that we go through. And how have you overcome challenges in your life? And I know you had your daughter had your own challenge there. And so I don't know if you want to speak about that, but how have you overcome trying challenges in times?
Yeah. Thanks for remembering and praying. And, just to share, my oldest, and she's a senior in college, but when she was in high school, started developing this weird health issues, fatigue and just a lot of different things. And so we went doctor after doctor, and blood test after blood test. I mean, it was probably a year and a half of nonstop, and then talking with insurance and all of that, trying to figure this out. And we finally, we went from every children's hospital to specialist, and we finally found the doctor, and which was a relief. And you'll hear this often from people who go through medical issues when they're not correctly diagnosed, or some people think, it's just growing up, or they dismiss it, and it's nothing is so frustrating as that. And then as a parent, and then when to have a diagnosis, it was something called chronic fatigue syndrome. And there's a lot of people who have it. It's not out there in the forefront. There's a documentary on Netflix that came out a few years ago called Unrest that gets you a picture, but it's to the point like you can go out and go out to eat lunch, and then you come home and you can't get out of bed for the rest of the day. And sometimes that lasted weeks and months. So long story short, I mean, obviously as a parent, Sam and myself, I mean, we're as happy as our kids are, right? And so it affected our high school, had to drop out, do independent studies, then, friends, she was enjoying playing volleyball, and we couldn't do that. Just a lot of things, and a lot of questioning of what is to come. And so it was a dark time. We went through a very difficult time. By God's grace, we found a doctor that's able to help her, and she's doing 100% now. And she's, but some of the things that help in hindsight, when I look back on it, not that I did it all perfectly during that time, is but when I kind of think about this, I think first of all is to know that life is hard. And we in ministry think somehow that if we are favored by God, and I hear that term used a lot, and that it's about good things and good experiences, and it's that ends up becoming me being favored, or #blessed, or something like that. But no, life is hard. Life as a Christian is hard. Life in ministry is hard. Life is hard. And so it's not if, but when suffering comes our way, we understand that. Secondly, is I think it's so important to have a big perspective of God. The things about God, the sovereignty of God, the omnipotence of God. To have a grasp on that, to know your biblical doctrine well, so that when it happens, usually what happens is if we can magnify God in our lives, worship, our theology, and He is big in my life. When something comes up in my life, we see it through the lens or the view of faith, and we see it, that way. Versus if my understanding of God is so small, then all of a sudden my life gets magnified. So I am the center of the world, and we don't see how God still loves us. God still is caring. God is allowing this to happen. So that comes to mind. And just one other thought is, for us, that was a season, and it's that I've learned that it's okay to receive help. And we've never received so much help and love from our church. It was always like, especially as pastors, you go in thinking and like, I'm here to help. I'm here to give the answers. I'm here to be the strong one. I ask you how I could pray for you. I don't tell you my, hardships and whatnot. And having that posture for so long, and, it was a humbling process. And then yet to ask for help. And, I think when I was younger, I kind of misunderstood that thought. This idea of not needing help means that I'm spiritually strong, like this false, connection. And that has nothing to do with that. And, now rereading like, the letters from Paul, and just about every letter he asks for help, and so, yeah. And so that comes to mind. We've had so many people, asking and praying and bringing food. And so that was a big source of strength. And so that was a big lesson during that time, for sure. It's okay as pastors or leaders to get help from your people, and so that is what setting an example, I think, really means. Not just showing them how long you pray or what your quiet times look like, but example is, this is what I do when I need help. And so that was a big blessing and source of strength for us. So that kind of comes to mind. And just one last thought, in hindsight, as we always think about God has a purpose, I've seen like my daughter just mature, and her strength and her ability to care for others and care for the things of God, serving, leading people at her school and at church. And these are all things I think that were tied into that. And I worried a little bit about our children. And I remember talking to some other peers about this, like, man, our children have no hardships. It's so different than when we grew up, as immigrant kids. We can communicate with our parents. We have to do everything on our own. And latchkey kids, and they were always working. And now it's like they're driven everywhere. We thought life is so good. How are they going to build any character? And somehow in God's love and care for us, He allows sometimes hardships to happen. Yeah. And then He builds things that are invaluable. So thank God, even for those times, it definitely wasn't easy. Yeah, and so I that comes to mind, and I just want to encourage our dear brothers and sisters in the Lord that just because you're a leader, you're not immune to any of this stuff, and it's okay, And so, that's just some thoughts. I can go on and on about that, but I'll just share that.
That was a lot of gold nuggets just dropped, and man, I don't even know where to go from that, because there's just so much good stuff in there that I absolutely agree with. I think I resonate with a lot of different things you said. Like I don't want to ask for help or get help, because I want to pray for you. You don't need to pray for me. But I think you're absolutely right. We as pastors, the more we can model humility, vulnerability, and asking for prayers, it actually we actually strengthen the community that we have with our church members and our family. And I love the idea of asking for help and relying on a community of not just your pastor friends, but also your church members that want to love you and support you. And
Yeah,
I think that's very important. And I think you also said something about we have to think right about God and the way that God sees suffering or even life. And life is hard. And so we all know that, but we got to be prepared for that. So, and you're right, like God can use these hardships to really teach our kids something that when they never would have learned or have gone through, because we live in America. We live in a very, even no matter where your social status is, like we're very privileged. And so,
and we're the richest people in this world, if you think about it, right? And we may not feel it when you look down the street, or you drive by the house that's 3 times as bigger or whatever, but we're the richest people in this world. And
100%.
for sure. That's a good thought.
I wanted to kind of hone in on something you said earlier, like your daughter's life had changed in senior year of high school, got this diagnosis, or this unknown diagnosis at first, and you guys had to spend a long time trying to figure out like what is going on. She had to drop out of high school. Your guys' lives just changed dramatically, and it would be like, that sounds like a college student. Like that's just what they do. Like they're always tired, right? Like having something that is like hard to know. It doesn't seem like doesn't sound like horrible, like you don't have like this severe mental illness, but it is still a very a very difficult thing that everyone went through. Like even for me, I had TMJ and I had fatigue, and there's days I just had headaches and I didn't know what was going on, and it was just super stressful for me. But from an outside perspective, it didn't seem like that bad because I looked fine, looked normal, but inside it was like painful. So how did you navigate that, where you knew the severity, but maybe people did not, and they may have judged you? Or how did you navigate those conversations, or how did you process that? Because I'm sure a lot of people who are going through pain right now, they're like, other people don't understand them, and so they may feel a little judged or misunderstood. How do you help? What did you learn from that could help other people?
No, that's definitely so true. And I think the number one thing is just presence, and just asking and being present, I think is so underrated. We've heard it a lot, but we still don't practice it. I've heard seminars, I've heard church leaders, and then I catch myself just talking over people, telling my story versus listening. But the power of presence, power of listening, power of asking, like, so if someone goes through a hardship, it's okay to ask them about it. And to say, what is that? What is that like? Tell me what it's, what's it impacted you on? Sometimes, like, for example, when someone loses a loved one, we don't know what to say. So we just kind of avoid them. We give them space. We don't know. But I think it's very helpful to ask about, okay, oh man, you lost your spouse, or you lost your parent, and how are you doing? And sometimes we jump into the mode of, I want to help them by, okay, let's just cheer them up and let's help them forget. They're never going to forget, right? And so, but to go into their space, sit with them, and just say, what were they like? What was it, or what was the last days like? What are the memories you have? And just listen. And I think that helps them to know, again, the power of someone being there with them. And I have a friend who years back lost his daughter when she was in elementary school. And so now, it's been probably about 20 years, about 18 years, I believe. But I remember being at a coffee shop, and we sat there for hours, and it was just 2 of us. It was like a 2-level coffee shop, and we're up there and just asking questions, listening, and me still thinking, I still can't grasp that. And it was just so powerful. And so, it helps me in that sense. And so, before we come to a judgment on someone. And, and I going through this it has educated me and taught me a great deal as well. And then I find out like there's a lot of people in my life, a lot of people in my church that have something very similar, and I used to think of it as, and make jokes about it or dismiss it, and to sit there and go, wow, and this person's in their 40s and they've been dealing with something like this. And so presence, listening, asking, there's no dumb questions, right? In that. And so I think that is very powerful.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife read a book and made me read it called Think Again by Adam Grant. Talks about the idea of being a curious scientist. So kind of what you're talking about, just being curious about the person and asking questions and not assuming you know or have it all figured out, because I have that problem. So I think
we all do. All our pastor types, we do,
Yeah. No, so I love that just hear their story, and it does open up another world that you may not know and understand. And so thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up, just a one last question is for maybe anyone listening here that are in ministry or maybe thinking about ministry or serving in ministry as a volunteer, what suggestion would you say for them so that they can last long, either serving as a volunteer or serving vocationally or professionally? What would you suggest and recommend?
Oh man, so many things come to mind. I mean, if I think about especially a pastor, right? I think there was a stat I just read, and the New York Times, their number one podcast, right? That's ranked number one in all the podcasts. They just had an episode about how all these people are dropping out of ministry. And so I listened to some of that, and how the numbers of people in ministry, pastors thinking about quitting has went from like 20 something percent to 42% or something like that, and so from a quarter to almost a half now after the pandemic. And so it is out there. I think a couple things come to mind. I've been doing this since like 1994, when I got my calling, as I was finishing college. And back then it was all just youthful zeal, right? But looking back and just thinking about it, I think a couple things come to mind. First is the idea of calling versus career. That we're called to this. You're called to this group of people. You're called to lead a youth ministry. You're called to be a senior pastor. You're called to. Calling is something you do not because you're going to get rewarded. You think about it. Ministry in itself is a terrible career choice. And graduating with a Master of Divinity is going to get you nowhere other than just debt for having that. And I remember thinking that like, oh, I have a master's degree when I finished seminary, but I was like, it's, career-wise, it really doesn't help. And people are like, what is a MDiv? And, people in the world were asking me, but it's a calling and not a career. Because if we think of it as a career, you think about recognition, you think about getting a bonus, a pay raise, or whatnot. You think about calling, and it is oftentimes, right, in ministry, this is how it goes. If something goes well, God gets the glory, and then if something goes wrong, it's like you get the blame, right? That's what happens oftentimes in ministry. and so if you don't have that perspective, it could be like really discouraging. And then secondly, with that idea of calling, if I go by my own feelings or popularity, that's why I think that the statistic of I don't know, I've heard different ones, or pastors last 1.5 to 2 years or something like that at their church, and they'll jump ship and move on. And I don't judge them all or anything like that, but in general, if it's hard, we say maybe this isn't it for me, or if I don't like it, or someone there doesn't like me. But if it's a calling, I stick it out and I continue through that. So that's one part. Another thought I had was this concept of rhythm. um, having a routine or patterns versus just reacting. And I think about the first, I don't know, 15 years of ministry. It was all just, I was just reacting. I was just putting out fires, and I didn't think about longevity. I didn't think about even a year in advance. It was just, if someone needed something, I was going to be there. If we needed to plan an event, I was going to be a part of that. And so rhythm, a routine, like you see a long distance race, it's always the person that leads in the beginning, they're never going to win, right? And one person goes on a dead sprint, and it's almost like, the favorites, and they're just kind of riding behind them, and just, they have it all planned out. And so with rhythm, I think about time. I had Mondays off. I played golf, and I'd go play golf on Mondays, and it was like this. Oh, I get to go do this every. It was something that I was looking forward to, and that was intentionally planned.
Good.
Vacation times with family, to do it intentionally as well. And like sabbaticals, I just finished the sabbatical, a time to rest, but also a time to grow. And so again, it's okay. And I came back from the sabbatical. I'm 50 years old, and I was thinking, man, I might have 1 or 2 sabbaticals left, right? If I, God willing, I don't know what retirement is, but let's say if it's 65, then I might have 1 left, and then I retire, or I might have 2 left, and you go, wow, this is definitely the kind of the back nine, right? Of that, with the concept of rhythm. I'll just share 2 more things. I was thinking about rhythm, hobbies, recreation, and I remember like Pastor Rick Warren talking about this at some leadership talk a long time ago. But he was saying, if you sit behind a desk all day and you're in front of books all day, you should do something outdoors. Like you should do something with your hands, and that changes your rhythm and pace. And so you should go gardening, or go hiking, or play golf, or go swimming, or whatever it is. And I thought, that's, or if you work with your hands, then maybe you could, sit inside and, enjoy a movie or something more in that nature. So I thought that was very practically helpful. And we as pastors often are, they don't, back in the old days, they don't call it the pastor's office. They call it the pastor's study, right? Because all you're doing is reading and preparing. And so a terrible way to rest is to sit in front of my computer, on Mondays. I don't even look at it. I don't go online barely. So that, and then, last thought I would say is relationships. Okay, so with pastors, your family comes first, and you have to make it intentional and obvious. Your wife comes first, your kids are right there. Because when it comes time, we've all been there when we have moved on to the next thing. They're the only ones that go with us. And that kind of stereotype of PKs, that being kind of dysfunctional, that probably, I'm sure you pray and, worried about that as you became, when you first had kids. I did that. I was like, I don't want my kids to have some scar tissue from being a PK. And so, that comes about when they say dad thinks they're more important than us, right? And so being intentional, so never putting them down, never ignoring them. I remember when my youngest one was little, and I would be talking to someone in church, and if she ran up to me, I would still just hold her, while I'm talking, and things like that. Family vacations, and you think about this, pastors, it's the only job where, let's say things don't go well at home. Let's say you get a divorce, you lose your career. And you could be a lawyer, you could be a dentist, doesn't matter if you get a divorce, as long as you do your craft well. Like we can't just go up and, lead well a meeting or preach a good sermon like what's going on with your wife and kids. It's going to matter. So if this doesn't go well, then nothing else will. If anything, you could almost neglect the church work a little bit in order to focus on the family, because if that doesn't go well, this is for sure not going to, church is definitely not going to go well, and they're not going to want me. And so, our dear friends, whoever's listening, I mean, man, if you are starting out and you are tired and you have 2 little ones and you're changing diapers at home, and it is far more rewarding to be out there saving lives and preaching the gospel and giving wisdom to people, and you don't want to go home, and let me encourage you, like, that's more important. And so family first in that way. And there's some other, and so I just wanted to share some thoughts. I was thinking about this as we were going to plan this, and it can go on and on and on, but I was like, as a good pastor, I was like, I need to make this 3 points, and share this.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
I loved it. I think, if you want to last long, even if you're a volunteer, I mean, you got to take care of yourself and you got to serve people. That's what we're for. But we got to remember, serve our family, our wives, serve yourself by taking care of yourself and intentionally resting and creating some boundaries in your life. And so I love that. I think that's a huge part of it, because if you can't last, you can't serve and you can't help other people. So I love that point, Pastor Steve. Thank you so much for your time. We have more information about you and your church on the show notes for Erasing Shame, but thank you for joining us.
And it's my pleasure, Sam. And man, thank you so much for all the good work you're doing for the kingdom and, and just the greater church at large. And so I'm just grateful and honored and humbled to be here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. Have a great day.
Hey, God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Erasing Shame podcast. Check out our website at erasingshame.com. We would love to hear your comments and questions. Please subscribe on any podcast app like Apple, Google, Spotify, or on Facebook and YouTube. And please add a rating, a review, and a share so more people can experience the freedom and healing that comes from erasing shame.